The battle for the Arctic Circle is getting hotter by the minute. Who will control the most important shipping route of the next 100 years or maybe 200 years? Will it be Norway? Will it be Russia? Will it be the United States? Russia has already sort of planted their titanium flag on the territory that has already filled right now. They've already filled the waters in the Arctic Circle with their nuclear-powered submarines, ice-breaking vessels, you name it, radar equipment, everything you can think of from Russia is already in this area now. Mobile military bases where they're not even locked in place, floating and moving. That's how much Russia has now already taken over this area. But Norway is trying to pick a fight right now, which we'll get to in just a moment. And is Norway, I guess, maybe doing the bidding of the United States once again? So first, Norway already has blood on its hands, of course. Norway and the United States blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, an act, according to Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Seymour Hersh, Norway was not an innocent bystander in this at all. In fact, they are the ones that literally pushed the button that blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. That's what Seymour Hersh stated in his journalism. Norway made the plan to use the Baltops 22 training exercise as cover for blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines. Norway's Navy supplied the Alta-class mine hunter that carried the divers and the explosives to the scene of the crime. And then on September 26, 2022, the Navy P-8 surveillance plane was provided by Norway. It then made a seemingly routine flight, flew out, dropped that sonar buoy that set off the explosion. So quite literally, Norway blew up the Nord Stream pipeline in concert with the United States. They're the ones that pressed the button. They're the ones that did most of the planning and coordination of this. So did Russia attack its neighbor as a response? No, Russia never attacked Norway for it. No, Russia didn't do anything to Norway. In fact, the opposite just happened in Norway. Norway expelled 15 diplomats for intelligence activities. The embassy officials are accused of spying under diplomatic cover, they said. Norway says 15 Russian diplomats working at the embassy are spies, and it's booting them out of the country. Norway's foreign minister accused Russian officials of working as intelligence officers under the cover of diplomatic positions. Like, let's be honest, isn't that what they all do anyway?
What? Work undercover?
I mean, look, they're Russian. They're in Norway, in the embassy, in the Russian embassy. Mm-hmm. Like, by nature, they're there as...
You're saying all diplomats are there as a foreign influence?
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's the case.
I mean, so we're suddenly surprised that they're being Russian? I just find this hilarious.
I mean, it's maybe not to the extent of the Americans, you know.
The show The Americans.
The show. Yeah. But yes, all embassies try to exert foreign influence on the place where they are. That is sort of their job. That's why they're there. I mean, they have this sort of cover of provide passports and notaries and things like that to expats living abroad. But beyond that, they all do outreach programs to spread their own culture and concepts. The United States no more than the United States spends, hundreds of thousands of dollars every year to throw a 4th of July party at all of its embassies. They sort of, we've talked about these drag queen shows in Ecuador as exporting our culture. And that is, I guess you could say that that's intelligence or foreign influence. It just is.
Intelligence officers, intelligence gathering. I mean, I guess if at night during the day they work at the embassy and then they've been tracking them, and at nighttime they go down to the dockyards with their binoculars or something, and they're like, yeah, we saw Mikhail down there every night. He's been down there with the binoculars, so we got to get him out of the country.
Well, yeah. We don't know.
Maybe he's there whale watching. We don't know. But anyway, they said that that's what they're doing. So, but Putin's not happy about this. Fired back. Putin's pissed, says Russia will respond. Putin says the relations between these two countries is the lowest it's ever been. It's not good for either side, says Putin. I mean, they share a friggin' border, for crying out loud. No good for either country, Putin says. So what exactly are you doing, Norway? Digging your own grave here? Because it doesn't help that the stooge in charge of NATO is the same guy, a guy by the name of Jens Stoltenberg. He's Norwegian. And the next battle is over the shipping lanes through Arctic waters. So what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to set up for a battle right now? We know that these sort of strategic exercises have been going back and forth where Russia will basically try to hit Norwegian targets in their practice rounds. And then Norway basically is doing the same thing, trying to hit Russian targets. So are we seeing like the staging grounds for the next battle that's coming over the Arctic Circle? There are 6 countries right now that surround the Arctic Ocean, being Russia, Canada, the United States, Denmark, Norway, and Iceland. And the Arctic Council, sort of governs all of this, is in danger, according to a number of different analysts on this. Right now, turmoil could be about to hit the Arctic Council. The council holds meetings to determine the future of the polar region. Right now, Russia holds the chair position. They had it for 2 years. They're about to hand it over next month to Norway. That's supposed to happen, but it might not. And what does that mean? What does that mean if it doesn't happen? Because the rest of the other countries, not including Russia, decided to cancel their most recent meetings. We don't really want to talk with you anymore, Russia. But wait a second, Russia's on the Arctic Council. So what's going to happen here? Even before that, the 7 Western Arctic Council members decided to pause their council cooperation with Russia. So let's get this right. Russia controls 50% of the Arctic. Because of the war in Ukraine, you're now snubbing their involvement in the Arctic Council, almost pretending they don't exist. What do you think they're going to do to make decisions about the Arctic? Are they going to do it without Russia's involvement? Good luck with that. You think they're going to sit idly by and have NATO countries dictate shipping lanes and military drills? The United States is woefully behind when it comes to any sort of Arctic infrastructure at all. And so now is the United States going to be dictating to Norway and these other countries what happens in the Arctic Circle? No one's talking about this story because I don't know why. You can't send press people there. You can't get cameras there. You can't get news reports there. So the news that we get basically is relied upon by the Arctic Council. The information we get comes out of basically the Arctic Council. I mean, if I wanted to book a flight, where would I go? How do I get to the I'm going to the North Pole to do some news reporting. Good luck.
I don't know.
Penguin Airways.
A canoe.
Going up there to do some work. What most people don't know, because Russia doesn't really talk about it, is what Russia is doing in the Arctic. You've all heard about China and their Belt and Road Initiative, which of course creates massive shipping lanes, rail infrastructure, trade routes through the Middle East and Asia and through the South China Sea. But you might not have heard about Russia's Arctic Road plan, and which is unfolding, which is doing virtually the same thing. Removing dependence on the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, and traditional trade routes, creating massive new trade routes that don't rely on those old 1800s trade routes anymore, that are, by the way, controlled largely by the United States, and now would be controlled by Russia. Oh, and by the way, and China. But you haven't seen this on CNN. Over the past year, the team at Redacted has been following this Arctic story closely. We've actually been building a documentary on the Arctic specifically and the sort of the hidden history of the Arctic and what this means going forward. But then, of course, this news started unfolding this week, and we had to jump on it. So this new trade route, which will control trade between the East and the West and the North and the South, doesn't rely on the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, which can take upwards of a month or more for deliveries. Russia is in the lead in this area. And we already know that the United States is, think about all of the massive mineral resources that are in this space. Massive, absolutely massive. And the United States is way behind on this, totally behind. Here's Rex Tillerson, who was the former Secretary of State, of course, big oil and gas magnate before that. So knows a thing or two about the power of oil and gas in this region. Listen.
What I can tell you is the United States is behind. We're behind all the other Arctic nations. They have dealt with this. They've gotten way ahead of us. The Russians made it a strategic priority. Even the Chinese are building ice-breaking tankers. Now, why are they building icebreakers? They're not an Arctic nation because they see the value of these passages. So we're late to the game. I think we have one functioning icebreaker today. Their Coast Guard's very proud of it.
Yeah.
As crummy as it is.
Yeah.
And I know in the budget, there is money in the budget for us to build another icebreaker. But the whole Arctic region, because of what's happened with the opening of the Arctic passageways from an economic and trade standpoint, but certainly from a national security standpoint, is vitally important to our interest.
So if they add the Arctic area to the Russian territory, they will have their hand on roughly 16% of the world's untapped oil reserves, 30% of the world's undiscovered natural gas reserves, gas that lies buried beneath the ocean, in addition to the vast mineral deposits, nickel, platinum, many rare earth minerals that are totally needed right now. Russia is sitting right there on top of, in tandem with China, by the way. The decades of undisrupted waters have also made it rich in plankton, which in turn attracted a massive number of fish for that live in that region as well. So all of the fisheries and the available stocks there as well. As if the Arctic needed to be any more appealing to Russia, the two commercial shipping passages, the Northwest and the Northeast, will have many advantages through that region. Two things to put in perspective here. Consider the traditional route of Rotterdam in the Netherlands to Shanghai in China. In the early 19th century, a ship would have had to travel around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. But once the Suez Canal in Egypt was built in the 1800s, the long trip around Africa could be avoided. The same journey became 23% shorter. The new Northeast Passage through the Arctic Circle will take another almost 25% time off of this journey. Tremendous. Saving both time, fuel, cost, making it incredibly strategic important. If Russia owns that passage, game over. Does Russia want to deliver oil and natural gas through the United States-controlled canal systems in the Middle East? Of course not. Remember when this happened at the Suez Canal?
Now it's one of the world's most important shipping routes and it's blocked. A giant container ship ran aground in the Suez Canal after losing power. And at around 200,000 tons and over 400 meters long, the container, well, it's going to take some shifting. 50 ships a day normally pass through the canal, carrying 12% of the world's trade. So the pressure is really on to get her refloated. Here's Richard Galpin.
So 6 days it took to remove that ship, bringing global shipping to a standstill. Russia has now deployed its own version of floating military bases in the Arctic, with the icebreaker vessels constantly on the move, looking for blind spots in the radar right now, so that their radar coverage is totally mapped out and taken care of. So even in the Arctic Circle with these icebreakers, and these sort of military bases are mobile instead of being stationary. China is currently developing special nuclear-powered ice-breaking vessels to connect Russia's Arctic road initiative with its own Belt and Road initiative. So combined, basically, China and Russia together on this, they have shares in the Arctic that top $35 trillion worth of oil and natural gas together. So does the United States want a piece of that? You bet they're trying. Is this maybe perhaps the next stage in this war that we haven't really heard much about? It was never really about Ukraine in the first place. It was always about undermining Russia's growth. But little did they know that they might put Russia and China so closely together in this alliance. I mean, Biden has done one hell of a job bringing about the downfall of the United States in the global power rankings, and then bringing together China and Russia in such a way, and even doing it over ice in the Arctic Circle.
Right. Well, the International Monetary Fund just today put out an estimate that by 2027, I think, that the BRICS nations will be responsible for 35% of the global economy. Already it is bigger than the G7 by just a few percentage points, but that lead is expected to widen in the near future, in the coming years that are upon us.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.